Hello. So section 2.5, it's originally called Descartes Rule of Signs. We are not even going to do that this year. So we're just going to practice finding zeros when some are imaginary. And the Descartes Rule of Signs has to do with figuring out if there's imaginary zeros by doing some math and making a chart. But since we have technology, we're going to figure out if there's imaginary zeros by graphing it on our calculator. So go ahead and, type in, while I fix this, type in the equation into the calculator. Which I have already done, and hit graph. Actually, before we even look at that, what is the degree of this? The degree is 6. So it's even, it's positive. We should have a graph that looks something like this. And there should be 6 zeros, because the number of zeros is the degree. But when I hit graph, I only see 2. Now, it is very possible that there could be a 0 somewhere that is not on this screen. So we could always zoom out. Zoom 3, enter. And it appears that it's going to keep going like this. Excuse me. You can keep zooming out. I promise you, I'm not going to give you anything on an assessment that you have to zoom out 20 times to be able to figure it out. It's going to be basically in that screen, or maybe one zoom out. Or maybe you have to zoom in to figure things out. But I'm not going to make it so super difficult that you have to zoom out 10 times to figure it out. So anyway, zoom 6. When I look at this, there's only 2. Well, let's take it out. Good old time to graph, but there's only 2 real zeros. That means that there are 4 imaginary zeros. And one other thing that's important that we have to know about imaginary zeros, and that we also have to know about irrational zeros. So imaginary zeros and irrational zeros. So imaginary zeros, they're going to have an I. And irrational zeros, they're going to have a square root, like plus minus square root, but you can't actually take the square root of it. I'm just going to make a number up. These always come in pairs. So there's only an even amount of imaginary zeros possible. There's only an even amount of irrational zeros possible. So if you are, trying to figure one of these problems out, and, if there's 6 zeros and you find 3 real zeros, there's got to be another 0, because there cannot be an odd number of imaginary. Never can there be an odd number of imaginary zeros. Only even. All right, and then I'm not going to be able to figure this one out, because the actual zeros that you can see if you use the zero tool, they're irrational. This is just a crazy example, just to show you that just because it says 6 here, you might not see all 6. So we'll find the zeros, and we're going to find them the same way that you were finding zeros on the past few assignments. We're going to go ahead and graph it first. So we're going to graph it, and it looks like this is a degree of 4, so it looks like I should have 4. I should have 4 total zeros. One second, my daughter is loud. Okay, so the degree is 4. There should be 4 zeros that we can find. I look at this picture and it looks like there's only 2. I'm just going to zoom in just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Zoom in really close. Still looks like there's only 2. It does look like one's at 0. So I'm going to try my value at 0. And yep, 0 is a 0. And then I'm going to try one at the number 1 also. And that one works as well. So I'm going to go ahead and, because x equals 0 and x equals 1 are easy numbers, I'm going to go ahead and use like synthetic division. Okay, so for x equals 0, I can actually look at this and say, oh, there is a greatest common factor of 0. So I could factor that out. Not of 0, I'm sorry. Greatest common factor of x. I can factor that out. And that x equals 0 is one of our zeros. So now I have left over x cubed minus 1, and 1 supposedly is another one of the zeros, so I'm going to use synthetic division. So we'll have a 1, but then I'm missing squared, and I'm missing x to the first, and then I have a negative 1. And I have left over x squared plus x plus 1. Now, when I get down to a quadratic, oh, sorry about this thing. When I get down to a quadratic, I should be doing it by hand at that point. Plus, if I go to my calculator, I have absolutely no idea how to find it because these answers must be imaginary. So we absolutely have to do this by quadratic formula. You could use complete the square, but because this middle number is odd, I don't want to use complete the square. Use quadratic formula. X equals opposite b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So you get negative 1 plus or minus square root of negative 3 all over 2. So anytime you have a square root of a negative number, actually let me rephrase that. The square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So if I have the square root of negative 3, that is the same thing as having the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 3. So the square root of negative 1 becomes I, and then we have square root 3 next to it. So I have negative 1 plus or minus I square root 3 all over 2. Now, for this assignment, I am not going to have you write the answer as factors. I'm going to have you write the answer as zeros. I feel like after that quiz that you all took, some of you don't understand the difference between the vocabulary. So quick little reminder, if we're doing factors, and I'll use x equals 1 as an example. Factors for x equals 1, factors would be parenthesis x minus 1. A 0 would be x equals 1, and then an x-intercept would be 1, 0. So when you do the x-intercept, it's the ordered pair. When you do the 0, it's just the x part. And when you do the factor, you have to take that 0 and move the number over so that the equation would equal 0 like that. So those are the 3 different vocabulary words that I think some of you are messing up. So anyway, for this example, for what you're going to do in your assignment, you're going to write the factors. And can't really write imaginary from left to right because they don't show. So this is how you're going to answer your questions on today's assignment, is you're going to put real numbers left to right, then imaginary negative to positive. Okay, that's the order that we're going to follow so that your answer key matches mine when you type it into Canvas. So we've got x equals, and we have a fancy bracket, and I have my real numbers are 0, then 1. And then the imaginary numbers, I'm going to write them separate, and you're going to write them separate on your assignment because there will be, I'll probably have boxes for you to do. Let's see, the negative would be negative 1 minus I square root 3 over 2, comma, negative 1 plus I square root 3 over 2, and then that will be the close of the fancy bracket. To type this in to the calculator, or to Canvas, since we don't have an equation editor on Canvas, it's not very user-friendly in that aspect. Let's see, you'd have to do a parenthesis. I'm just going to type this one in here, or write it down how I would type it in. I would do a parenthesis, then I would do negative 1 minus, and you will go ahead and just put an I. Then you'll have to write square root as SQRT, then put the 3, close, divided by 2. So that's how that entire answer would look like typed on the computer. And I'll put something like that in the directions as well, so you don't have to remember it, but just so you have it in the video, that's how I would type that one in. All right, the last one, x to the 4th plus 6x squared plus 5. Go ahead and type that in your calculator. And the degree is 4. Which means that I should have 4 solutions, but my picture tells me none. Now I can zoom out. I promise if you zoom out, this example will not give you any more. There's actually 4 imaginary answers for this one. If this happens to you, then there must be a way to factor it, like completely without actually having to use the calculator to find any of the zeros. If you can't find any of the zeros from the calculator, then I have made it so that you could factor it. So let's look at just factoring this. X to the 4th plus 6x squared plus 5 is a trinomial. There's no greatest common factor. And I do know that 5 times 1 are the only factors of 5. And because of the signs, I know they both have to be plus. To get x to the 4th, I would do x squared and x squared. Now if I multiply that back together, we've got x squared plus 5x squared does give us 6x squared in the middle, so this is factored correctly. And I put a 0 in for f of x because I'm finding zeros. So now at this point, I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 because these don't factor further. And they're quadratic, so I can solve each of these factors now. And I can do these by square roots. X squared equals negative 5, square root both sides, put plus minus. X equals plus minus square root negative 5. When there's a negative in it, it becomes I. And then the square root 5 does not simplify any further. Over here, same thing, x squared equals negative 1. Square root both sides, plus minus. X equals plus minus. The negative becomes an I, but square root of 1 is possible, so we're going to get 1I, or just plus minus I. Putting this one in order. How do I want that? Let's just put the one that has like the lower amounts of coefficient on it, so that's 1. We'll put that one first, so we'll put negative I, positive I, and then we'll do negative, or should we just put this all in order? Oh, maybe we should put it in order. I'm sorry, I didn't even think about how I would want you to type this into your Canvas until just now. Let me just write these down and then I'll think about it as I'm writing them down. I radical 5, and then positive I radical 5. Honestly, if I were just doing this on paper, I would write plus minus I radical 5. That's how I would write it on paper, but unfortunately, we're not doing that if I'm giving you an assessment or if you're typing it in Canvas. So why don't we do right imaginary in order, negative to positive, just like I said above. So on the Canvas, you would put negative I radical 5, then you'd put negative I, then you'd put positive I, and then you'd put I radical 5. This is how you would type it in to Canvas for your answers. And I'm going to have you type these into Canvas for this assignment. So this assignment is basically what you did on your last assignment, only you're writing your answer as zeros instead of writing your answer as factors, and you will have imaginary solutions for this one. All right, if you have any questions, please send me a message or come in during my office hours. I would love to hear you, see you, anything. Have a great day.